pick you up at 6 o'clock on Thursday. Yes, I will. Because I can pick you up. I've done it in the past, picking people up. We want you there. No, it's not that much trouble. You don't live that far away. It's not opposing. No, it's not. We went a little longer, than we normally do, and all that. So. But we want you to come, and so I'm willing to pick you up. All right. Okay. Because Arlene's going to be gone until October. So. She said she's in, so.
All right. Microphone testing. Microphone check. Are we live? Hello, hello. Am I gonna, can you hear me? Is this microphone on?
He can't get the microphone to get it on.
Do I need a new microphone?
Yeah, you need one.
I can go without a microphone, but my voice is gonna start cracking. There we go. All right. Welcome, everybody. If you find your way to your seats, run a little bit behind, but I think it should be okay. We're doing an introductory lesson today, so we'll get into the meat of things starting next week. We are live online, but we don't know if the audio is working there, so you might be watching a blank stream, and we apologize for that. But we are glad for you guys being here. Looks like we have a really good turnout today with children's class starting. I know that's helped some of you guys, and we're thankful to have you here. So parents, welcome. So we are going to be doing a course called How We Got the Bible. I didn't realize this, but it's been 3 years since I taught adult class when I went back and looked at it. So, with COVID, time gets weird and flies quickly. So it's exciting to be teaching you guys again. This class is not quite the undertaking that Genesis and Jesus was. It could be if we wanted it to be. But this is going to be about an 8-week class, whereas in Genesis and Jesus we did over about 6 months. And so this is a topic that's kind of very interesting to me because I found out when I started looking into it how little I actually knew. And so, Chuck, if you want to go ahead and do the slides for me. Our clicker was working until it wasn't. And that's the way it goes. Our PowerPoint was working until it wasn't. While he gets that, just hit the keys, maybe, the right arrow on the keyboard. Hey, one more time. There it goes. Perfect. So just in case we can find out we don't even need to take a class, I'm just going to ask you guys, if you need to, I can easily walk you the microphone, so just raise your hand, holler, or like I said, I'll give you the mic. I want to ask you guys, how do we get the Bible? In like 3 sentences, if you can limit yourself. We went to Barnes & Noble. That hurts, came to Lightfoot. Council of Nicaea. Okay? Did they write about it?
I meant for everybody to hear that except you.
Be careful what you say.
There you go.
Sometimes I hear everything, sometimes I don't. Council of Nicaea, that is an important moment in the history of the scriptures and things like that, but that wasn't where it originated, Steve.
Inspired by God.
Inspired by God. That's a pretty good answer.
Many writers over hundreds of years.
Many writers over hundreds of years. Really good answer. So when I asked this, we did some of this class with young adults. It's kind of funny because when I asked them, they said God made it. And I was like, okay, how? And it was like, very carefully, right? So the thing about this is a question that for most of us as Christians, especially if you've been a lifelong Christian or many years, this isn't really a question that faces us. Once you start applying the Bible to your life, it becomes self-evident. You see through your own life all the ways that it is true, and it never strikes you as something to really question or ponder to that level. And a lot of times we'll talk about who wrote the books. Who wrote Jeremiah? Jeremiah. Who wrote Isaiah? Isaiah. Who wrote Leviticus? Leviticus. So, we'll talk a little bit about the authors and things like that, but it doesn't go that much farther. And the interesting thing about this topic is it is a huge hurdle for people that are skeptical, right? So for people that don't come from that upbringing or maybe you're just new to it, that are starting to really invest in the Bible, or just depending on your personality type, you can really analyze this and wonder, if this is supposed to be the Word of God, because it says some hard things in there, right? As especially those of you guys that have studied the Bible enough, you're going to come across something you don't like what you're reading very much. And if you haven't gotten there yet, keep reading. I promise you'll find it. So you read these things, it's supposed to be the Word of God, teach that, inspired Word of God, and all that is true. But what this class is going to do is hopefully equip you to have more conversations. So the purpose of today's class, specifically, just this week, is an introduction. So we're going to talk about, I've already prefaced it, but why is it important that we study this? And also, what is the class going to look like as a whole as we move forward? So remember, you hit my buttons. Now, we might get into a little bit of a theological or philosophical question of what is the Bible. That's going to be kind of tertiary what we're talking about, but those types of conversations might come up as we get into the nitty-gritty, and it's worth thinking about. But really, for the purpose of this class, is less theological and more historical. So just literally, how did we get it? What was the process of transmission? If God spoke to this man at this time, and he wrote it down, how did we receive it? Things like that. Or, the person that is written about didn't write it. Well, how did the person that wrote it get the story to then write it for us to receive it? Okay, so it's going to be a lot more into kind of the history portion of this question, but what is the Bible might kind of come up and get your mind stirring as we go. All right, so why should we care how we got the Bible? Okay? Sure admit it. So this is an important point. The Bible is the only testimony we have as to what God has done for humanity. Now, because the Bible has a lot of hard topics, it has a lot of stories that from our modern worldview, sometimes you like to sidestep or ignore or not have to, teach. People have emphasized things like science and the idea of you can just intuit God just by looking at the broader universe, looking at the reality of physics and things like that. But what's important to note is that the Bible is of the utmost importance because it's the only testimony that we have for who really God is and what He has done. Okay, so you can intuit some things about God. You can intuit just by looking at the universe around you that there's good. You can intuit that there's evil. You can look at the universe and just intuit that there's complexity. And you can recognize that there's a designer. Okay, but you can't just using your two eyes look around at reality and intuit that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Okay, that He died on a cross for the forgiveness of your sins. And that He rose again on the third day. The only way you know any of that is through the history that's been passed down through Scriptures. Okay, so if you didn't have those Scriptures, you don't actually know the finer details of God. You could know there is a God, but the only reason you know what you know about God is because the Bible has been passed down and taught you the specifics of His character, of the way He works, and of His personality, things like that. You only know that from the Bible. Okay, so you can't sidestep it, you can't minimize it. And when hard things come up about the Bible and hard questions that people have about the Bible, it's not enough just to go, well, don't worry about it, okay? Because it's the most important document that we have, and it is the revelation that's been given to us by God to reveal who He is. So that we don't have a lot. So I want to read the Bible verse. It's in John chapter 5, and then it's going to be beginning in verse 31. So go forward one more, because I have it on the screen for those of you guys that have your Bibles. There we go. So I know it's really small on the screen. I just wanted to fit the whole thing in one screen rather than half the tablet. So hopefully you guys bring your Bibles from week to week. This isn't going to be the most scripture-heavy class, but we are going to read scriptures where they're applicable. And I'll try to have them on the screen smaller or larger than that when I can. So this is Jesus speaking. Okay, the Pharisees are kind of cornering Him at this time. He's been saying some things about being the bread of life and equating Himself to God, and talking about how salvation is raising people from the dead, and all these things that are going to be accomplished through Jesus. And so the Pharisees hearing this get very upset with Him because you don't just go putting yourself on equal footing with God. I mean, you do for Jesus because you are, but for anybody else, this would be a problem, right? So this is something that Jesus is defending some of the claims that He's making about Himself to the Pharisees. So He says this in John chapter 5, verse 31. If I testify about heard his voice, nor have you seen his form, nor does his word dwell in you, for you do not believe the one he sent. You study the scriptures diligently, because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me, and yet you refuse to come to me and have life. I do not accept glory from human beings, but I know you. I know that you do not have the love of God in your hearts. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me, but if someone else comes in his own name, you will accept him. How can you believe, since you accept glory from one another, but do not seek the glory that comes from the only God? But do not think that I will accuse you before the Father. Your accuser is Moses, on whom your hopes are set. If you believe Moses, you would believe in me, for he wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how are you going to believe what I say? So, this is a fascinating scripture to me, and you'll see in a second why I chose this to kind of give some context to why we're following this course thinking. So, I've highlighted some of the important scriptures. You can leave it right there. So, Jesus is kind of talking about the validity of his claim, right? And I love the way he starts this out because it makes perfectly common sense, right? So if I make a claim to you and you didn't see it, what are you going to ask for? Show me a video. Well, I didn't have my phone on me. But my friend was there. Well, you know, their word is good. Did they take a video? They didn't have their phone on them either. Right? So you ask for some type of verification of proof. And Jesus recognizes. So he says, if I say all these things about myself, those things aren't valid in and of themselves. You're not just supposed to take me based off of what I'm saying, because there's proof that what I'm saying and what I'm doing is truly God's plan, right? So what does he appeal to? First, he appeals to a testimony of who? John the Baptist, right? So he's saying, John came, he told you everything about me. He was preparing the way, right? That was his message, prepare for the way of the Lord, right? The time is near. That was his message.
And you like it at that time.
Yeah, you need to savor it because the axe is at the root. We'll talk about that part. But John prepared the way, right? So he's saying, hey, that's one witness to the truth of what I'm telling you, right? Does he stop at John the Baptist? By the way, they recognized John as a righteous man until he started pointing to Jesus. Then all of a sudden they didn't like his message. But when he was just telling you the Messiah was coming, they trusted John, right? So he appeals to the authority of John, but he doesn't stop there. What's the next appeal that he makes to the validity of his word? And, well, he doesn't think that he does. We're going to talk about that. But he says, the works that the Father has given me to finish, the very works I'm doing, testify that the Father has sent me. Okay, so we're talking about some of these miracles, right? So Jesus says, I am the Son of God. I'm here to die for your sins. And I'm going to be raised on the third day. And then he's doing all these miracles, right? He's healing the blind. He's making the lame walk again, right? He's turning water into wine. He's calming the storm. He's proving his authority over every facet of physical reality. Can anybody do that with God? No. We've read stories in the Old Testament about guys like Elijah and Moses, these guys that do miracles, but who's empowering them? God is, right? Now, does God empower man who's falsely saying, like, I am God, this is God's entirety, there's no way to be saved but through me? And if he's lying, does that sound like a man that God is going to bless with the power to do miracles? No, right? So he's appealing to the miracles. He's saying, how am I doing these things? If I'm a liar, my message is false. Why am I able to do the things that I'm claiming I can? Now, raise your hand in here if you've ever seen Jesus do a miracle. Like, I know he's worked miracles in our life, but the physical man of Jesus, you've watched him do a miracle. Raise your hand if you were alive in like 30-ish AD. Nobody's going to really claim that? So, we did not get the benefit of seeing Jesus, right? So that was an incredible testimony for those that were alive and contemporary with him at that time. Think of what that would do for your faith to watch him do a miracle, right? As he's done preaching this salvation message, right? That would be powerful. But unfortunately for us, we weren't there. We didn't get a chance to see that. And we didn't have smartphones quite yet. Otherwise, I'm sure we have some good footage. But we didn't get to see that. So that testimony actually means very little for us. What is the final appeal he makes, and for our purpose, what is the testimony that speaks the most powerfully to us? The Father himself has testified concerning me, verse 37. You study the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life. These are the very scriptures that testify about me. And is that there is incentive to control what God says. Okay, we need to just be honest about that. Okay, so throughout history, we know, and even till today, there are people that will do evil in the name of God and claim that God told them to do it, or this is what Scriptures say. If we're being honest inquirers about this, there is incentive to be in control of what God says. So you can't eliminate the possibility of human intervention or human manipulation, as we're going to see throughout this class. That's a ludicrous theory, but people believe that this was a message controlled by Moses, or controlled by the kings at the time, or controlled by X, Y, or Z to try to manipulate the people to pay the priests, right? It was all just to raise funds, and the greed of the priestly class. I mean, these things have happened throughout history, but this is not a factor in the story of the Bible, but you need to know why. You need to be able to explain that to people that are skeptical of religion, they're skeptical of people in authority, especially people claiming to be spoken to by God, right? That's a huge red flag for people in our modern day. But you will learn why those concerns shouldn't matter to the study of the Bible and how we got it. All right, next thing. This is ultimately, people you're going to try to reach are going to have skepticism. Not everybody, okay? Some people do not, it doesn't bother them. They're not burdened by that. It's not a struggle that they have. They'll have other struggles, right? Other questions, but the specifics of, well, what are we even reading? What is this? How do I know I should trust it? Where do we get it from? That is a huge hurdle for some people, and in my experience, my own experience, I'm not good at answering that. Well, God gave it to us. Well, I don't believe in God, so great. That sounds hokey, right? So, that was plenty of reason to justify it in my head. I never thought about the answer past that, okay? So this will help you, not with everybody, but with those types of inquirers that are just very hung up on this. Hopefully you have something new you can give them to show them that, no, this is solid all the way down. Poke it, prod it, learn about it, because you will be rewarded. You're not going to find something or unearth a discovery that undermines the truth of what you're reading in this book. The more you dig in, the more your faith will grow. And let me help you with that. Let me do that as well. I'm willing to learn more about that too. Now, Tarun, if you can you might have to hit it twice. And Amanda, do you have a comment?
Then also the validity of the Bible also seems to have that there are other works that man has made to add to that. So I think that also, that's another thing that I've had friends say, well, what about the Book of Mormon, and what about this and this?
Right.
If the Bible proves itself and these other works don't go along with it, those cannot be in existence. Like those works called to be part of the scripture.
Right. I'm going to reiterate that just in case you didn't hear it. She mentioned that it also helps clarify some of the confusion around other holy books, right? Why don't we believe in the Book of Mormon? Or, the Quran, or these other things? Well, what you'll find is they're not in harmony with the testimony that you read in the Old Testament. They claim they are, right? They claim to be built on the messages God has sent, but then as you study them, you'll find that there's a whole lot of contradictions and things like that. And so you'll be able to answer some of those other questions that people have. Well, is the Bible not just one of many holy books or wisdom literature kind of thing? Is it not just one of many? We could read them all, and they're all perfectly useful, but ultimately not the ultimate truth, right? You'll be able to answer some of those questions. Now, I'm just going to use the word apocryphal books. We're not going to go all the way in depth on some of those topics, but that is going to be a part of this class, and we are going to mention some of those books. And because a lot of people, the first thing the question you get is, why are you in the Book of Enoch? Or somebody's heard about these other books that are in there. And through this class, studying, ultimately, I have a lot of confidence in the books that are in the Bible or why they are. But that is a great point, Amanda, is that you'll be able to clarify some of those other questions, not even specifically about the Bible, but about other religions and their holy scriptures that you'll learn about. Now, I wanted to pull this quote. I didn't know this guy. Well, they don't know if this guy actually said it, but maybe he coined it kind of a thing. Like he probably didn't come up with this. But this is a sentiment that I hear a lot among my peers. This is how our view of history is. And there's truth to this, but it's not necessarily applicable to the Bible. But this is a quote by Graham Best. It says, "In all revolutions, the vanquished are the ones who are guilty of treason, even by the historians. For history is written by the victors." Have you ever heard that? History is written by the victors? "And framed according to the prejudices and bias existing on their side." You ever heard that history is written by the victors? What is that communicating? What is that implying about history? It may not be factual, right? You're getting a biased version of it that might omit some details. It might embellish some other things to make the side that won look better and the side that lost look worse. Now, to be clear, that happens. That is a factor of history. But this one way of looking at history for most people undermines the Bible, because they'll say, well, it's all just perspective, and you can't really believe what they were saying because the Jews and the Israelites wanted to write this stuff to make themselves look better. And that is their answer for why you shouldn't take the Bible as ultimate truth. Which one?
What if it was written by the Romans?
Yeah, what if?
instead of the Jews?
Exactly. Yeah, then the Romans would be the heroes. They're only the bad guys. That's how people look at it, okay? But I think Jamie said one of her answers for how we got the Bible is many writers over hundreds of years, okay? And so this perspective is always moving over centuries, and it culminates into one cohesive message, okay? And if you don't believe that God guided that, then you're believing it's just pure coincidence, and a guy named Jesus apparently put this all together in his genius and lied to everybody and figured out a way to then spawn the world's biggest religion of all time, inspired by but twisting these Old Testament passages. Now, that's not true, and as we're going to learn, but this is something that really highlights people. Tarun hit it once. I might have just, the history is written by the victors. Honestly, the funny thing about this is this guy was writing this in defense of the Confederate Rebellion. So I don't think people know that quote this. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't. Because he was saying why the Confederates weren't in the wrong. So take that with a grain of salt, this quote. But I've heard that all throughout college and just in discourse. History is written by the victors. You can't trust it. But this is a history that we can trust. And I want to be clear, it is a history, okay? So some people call it myth, some people call it tall tales, some people call it whatever, but you're holding a history book is what your Bible is. Now, there's other types of books. There is poetry in there. There are metaphorical stories and symbolism and things like that. But by and large, what you're reading is a history book, Stephen.
Yeah, and what that doesn't take into account is that historians themselves are aware of this, and they're always arguing with each other and trying to come up with the best viewpoint.
Yes, you can't get two historians to agree on something, and that's an important point, something we're going to cover more in future weeks. But modern man, we have a tendency to overinflate our own intelligence and assume that past generations were inferior to our intellect. But I'm going to have some things in later weeks that's going to show you how deeply that these ancient, like the people that were distributing the Gospels, like 100 years or less after Jesus lived, had questions about the validity of the testimonies. And if you read Luke, the whole reason, why did Luke write his gospel? Because he wanted an orderly account. He didn't just go, well, I'm a dumb ancient person that'll believe anything. He was a skeptical person. He says, why should I believe any of these stories? So he himself investigated, interviewed, collected, and talked to people that witnessed it themselves and compiled it. So that's a very good point, Stephen, is that people are a lot more aware of the dangers and biases. Like, we didn't just realize bias in the past 100 or 200 years. They've understood this for a long time and been very careful about how they pass on history. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it should at least give you a grain of salt to say, well, maybe there is some validity to these histories that I'm reading. And usually you don't question it as much. It's the Bible that you question, but you wouldn't question things that you're reading about ancient Rome and things like, we teach histories from the same time periods without hesitation. But hopefully this will give you some confidence in the Bible. So Tarun, we're going to carry on. So I'm a sci-fi nerd. I was trying to figure out a good way to describe the kind of the journey and the emotional impact of the class. And so I don't know if you guys are sci-fi nerds like I am, but there's a concept called the Uncanny Valley. In fact, just raise your hand. You ever heard of the Uncanny Valley? Few? So the Uncanny Valley is this idea. Hit forward once. What do I have? Do I have the chart? So the point I'm making is investigating this topic can be scary, because what the Uncanny Valley effect is in robotics, okay, so you just have a hunk of metal. Okay, it's not very interesting. You don't really want to interact with it, although that's been proven false because Alexa is just like a little black nothing, and we talk to her all the time, right? But for whatever reason, as humans, we like to interact with other humans, and so you have a little black box with a speaker, but eventually you put little googly eyes on it, give it a little bit more humanistic features. Over time, maybe use some eyebrows, a smile. Well, it could use some legs, so you add some legs, you add some arms, and for a while, it actually makes you bond with the robot, right? You're like, oh, what a cute little innocent robot. And then you keep making it more sophisticated and more sophisticated, and eventually you get to this point where you're hitting the Uncanny Valley where you're like, dude, it has like skin on it, but like the eyes are like don't move right, and they don't blink, they blink all weird. So it looks kind of human, but I can tell it's not a human, and that makes me feel really weird about it. And then you're in the valley, and then as you keep adding sophistication, eventually the robots get so sophisticated, and a lot of sci-fi movies have been made about this. Eventually you can't tell the difference. It might as well just be a human, and if it didn't tell you it was a robot, you wouldn't know. So all of a sudden, you're not bothered by it anymore. And that's kind of the way this class is going. Hit one more time. So this is like a graph depiction of the Uncanny Valley. And that's how this class can be. Okay, so at first when you're learning this stuff, you're like, wow, this is interesting. This is so cool, all that I'm learning about how we got the Bible. Then we're going to hit some hard parts where it gets very complicated. Okay, it's not just as easy as God told me. That'd be great. I wish God would just tell me the whole Bible like in a vision and then burn it into my brain so I could trust it. But it's a little bit more complicated. He did say it, but how we got it has a lot of steps in between, and that can be the part, right? That's the part that freaks people out, these extra steps. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't like what I'm learning here. But then as you keep going, eventually you're going to come out the other side and have a renewed faith and a renewed passion for the Bible and how we got it. So I had some examples. I put this in the wrong order. So go forward, Tarun. So, and then start hitting it. Okay, so like here's just a couple examples. Stay there, stay there, stay there. So you have like WALL-E, right? That movie, have you seen WALL-E? There's no words for like 40 minutes. But because WALL-E has these big eyes and is cute, makes cute kind of like baby noises and stuff, you can relate to him and you enjoy watching him. It doesn't bother you. Like little kids, I'm telling you, they can watch this movie even though there's no talking for like 30 minutes. Then you have R2-D2, one of the cutest like noise, like robots with the noises, right? And then you get C-3PO, who is kind of cute. That's actually Anna's favorite Star Wars character. If you probably never met somebody who C-3PO is their favorite character, but I don't know why, that's Anna's favorite character. But he's a little bit creepier. Like if you had to say which is cuter between R2-D2 and C-3PO, who's cuter? R2, clearly, or BB-8, same thing. It's going for that same vibe. Now, I don't know if you ever saw Bicentennial Man with Robin Williams, but that movie is a little bit about this concept. And so Robin Williams is a robot, and he's getting more sophisticated over time. And then I think by the end of the movie, he just looks like a person, right? But the family has grown to like love him, and it's all about love, right? So that's a little creepier. Like, which is creepier between C-3PO and Robin Williams' robot? Yeah, the Bicentennial Man's a little creepier. And then go forward one more, Tarun. I don't know if you've ever seen iRobot, but I mean, that's getting a little bit creepy. And then Chuck, you might need to do the I want to show you guys a video, because this is a real thing. It's in movies. It's been in movies and books, this whole concept, but I want to freak you guys out a little more. So, yeah. The Uncanny Valley, we're living in it right now, I promise. I think we already pulled it up. Chuck, you'll need to rewind it. Isn't creepy, I don't know what is. But we've eventually reached a world where it's scarier to talk to an actual person than one of these weird computer program things. But you can see how they're trying to emphasize the eyes can dilate and all this, but then they have this weird blank look. It's just creepy. So hopefully those will be teaching our kids here in about 10 years. Because that's one of the uses that they had for that. So the whole idea, though, is that as you learn and the complexity builds for how we got the Bible, because it's a long history, guys. I don't know if you know this, but Moses lived a long time ago. I don't know if you know this. And there's a lot of steps. Moses wrote it, I hold it, but he didn't hand it to me directly, as awesome as that would be. There's been steps in between, okay? So it can be scary for a while, but ultimately on the other side of it, you'll be unfazed because you'll recognize where we are. So you're going to have to tab way forward. No, you're fine. We're almost done. We got about 5 minutes. So, I wanted to say, this is, do you guys remember Clippy? Clippy is like the original version of those computerized people that are talking to you. Did Clippy ever make any of our lives easier? He was supposed to be helpful, but like he would pop up at the worst times and cover your screen, and you couldn't quite figure out how to get him to go away. But the funny thing is like it's a robot, it's your computer talking to you, but they added googly eyes, so now it's cute and friendly. All right, Tarun, one more. Does this creep anybody out? That's just a person. I Googled woman, and that was one of the top stock images on Google. So that's just a person. So it doesn't freak you out anymore, right? So that's how this is going to be with this class. Once you get to the end, you're going to have a newfound appreciation. So we can go forward, Tarun. All right, so I kind of hit it like, yeah, so this is what I was talking about. So at the beginning of the class, you're going to be thinking it's neat. This is really cool info. I'm glad we have this. And then hit it. Okay, it's complicated. I don't like this anymore. Right? There's a reason we don't talk about this. It's too many steps and too many people, and what if something went wrong? And you're going to see that nothing went wrong. Just breathe. And then Tarun. Only God could do this, ultimately. The more complexity that builds, the idea that mankind somehow orchestrated this really loses a lot of its punch. All right, so I wanted to give you guys a breakdown of the plan. So just hit it, start hitting it. So this was the intro. That was today. Next week, we're going to talk about the method. So how are they writing these things and transferring it? We're going to talk about assembling the Old Testament. The week after that is going to be assembling the New Testament. Those are 2 really good weeks. This is the Septuagint, is the 5th lesson. This is one of the most important steps in the process that many of us, I had never heard it until I went to Sunset a few years back as a teenager and even a young adult. I'd never heard of it. Keep going. The Vulgate, which is the Latin translation, and we're going to be talking about the Catholic Church. That one class is going to cover like 1,500 years of history, so you're going to need to buckle up. But that's part of the problem is they're a confusing 1,500 years, so we just skip them. It's like you have the New Testament, and then you have the Church of Christ, baby, like in like the 1800s or whenever it started, and that's all you need. And people are like, well, what happened in the like 1,600 years between those? It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. That's not a good answer, right? So then we're going to be talking about English translations, and then the last lesson is going to be on the proliferation of the Bible, the fact that you can download it in your pocket right now, and that it's the best-selling book of all time. Talk about some of the modern translations, more the ones we use, ESV, NIV, things like that. And then also somewhere in there, probably in those later classes, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the apocryphal books and what to do with that. But some of that conversation is going to happen when we're talking about assembling the Old Testament and the New Testament, and why did those books get excluded from what we consider canonical and things like that. So that's the plan. Then the last thing I wanted to leave you with is some resources. So if we go forward. So this class was kind of inspired by a guy named Patrick Mead. My dad, I don't know how he found out about these lessons, but he's at a place called 4th Avenue Church of Christ, and he did a series called How We Got the Bible. His was a lot more in-depth than mine's going to be, and it was also a lot longer. But a lot of what he goes into is very good, but some of it is conjecture. I've tried to trim everything that's conjecture, and I just want to have full disclosure. There's an element of this, okay, that is still going to require faith. You will still have to have faith at the end of this class. And there's only so much we can know about every step of the way. But a lot of the information he gives is really good. Some of it is conjecture, though. But he is like a linguist, and he's, I believe, from Scotland originally. And so when he's talking about the Old English translations and things like that, And he reads some of the Old English, and you realize, like, wow, we can't even understand the language that ours derive from. It's kind of interesting. That's all really good information. So if you Google Fourth Avenue Church of Christ and How We Got the Bible, there's just a web page with all of them on there. I put the link there. We can email that out if anybody's interested. Then there's a book called How We Got the Bible by Neil Lightfoot. That one is more of like a page turner. It has very good info, but it's not the most in-depth, but it'll be a good read if you just have a cursory interest but want to get a little bit more than what you get from this class. That's a really good book. It's only like 180 or 200 pages or something like that. So that's a really good book that I used. And then the next one is The Journey from Text to Translations. Now, this one's more of a textbook. The most information came out of that one because it is a textbook, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was a very fun read, okay? It's a textbook. So you're not going to just sit down with a nice cup of cocoa and have a good couple of hours. That's, if you really want to read it, that's there, and that's a good resource. And then one of the last ones is the New Testament Documents by F.F. Bruce. Now, this one, I need to see if he has more books, because F.F. Bruce is like a genius. But his writings it's all about like the New Testament, so it's very pertinent to that lesson on the New Testament. I use it a lot for that, but that it was a much narrower focus, whereas like the Journey from Text to Translations is like starting, at the beginning and walking you through every step. So that's a really good book I recommend, and it's short. It's like 80 pages or something like that. And so there's other bits and pieces that I took from other sources, but for the most part, the podcast and those 3 books is where a majority of the information came from. And like I said, I've tried to really condense this into only stuff I'm confident we can know for sure. There's a little bit of bits and pieces in between that you can have an opinion on, I can have an opinion on. But you're going to get the facts as best as I can give them to you through this class. So that is that. I appreciate you guys coming. I hope this piqued your interest a little bit, and you will come back over the next 7 weeks. Thank you, guys.